Where does the Titans roster currently stand as the legal tampering period is coming to a close and the new league year is about to begin? We're going to break down the latest moves the Titans have made and what they still need to do to get this roster into a better place before the draft. This is the Music City Audible. Let's get to it. Welcome everyone to another episode of the Music City Audible podcast presented by Broadway Sports Media in partnership with 440 Sports. I'm Justin Graver. With me, as always, Justin Melo. Justin, we are a few hours away from the start of the new league year. How are things going, my friend?
Doing well. By the time this actually gets out there, I imagine the new league year may have already started or is very close to starting. It'll be close. But, Titans had an interesting Tuesday in free agency and an interesting Wednesday. Not at Wednesday morning. We're recording this on Wednesday morning. They've already made a move today that we're about to cover. They didn't do enough on Tuesday to garner an emergency podcast, right. I would say. So shout out to Arden Key. We're not trying to call everything an emergency podcast. But they've certainly done enough now where we felt it was a good time for a roundup episode to cover these last 5 or 6 little newsers that have come out over the last, 36 hours or so.
Exactly. So if you missed it, we did an emergency pod for the Titans signing left tackle Dan Moore. So go back and check that one if you missed our reaction to it. We did an emergency pod for the Titans signing Cody Barton. So go back and check that out if you missed it. Those were the 2 biggest moves the team has made. Let's go into where they went from there. So the safety market was pretty active. There were a lot of high dollar contracts handed out for safeties, sort of the opposite of what we talked about on our free agency preview pod, and the opposite of how the safety market has been the last few years. We've seen a handful of high quality veterans on the market in August trying to get, a few $1 million a year, and teams just weren't paying them. Well, this year we saw guys like Cam Bynum and Javon Holland got a pretty sizable deal. I mean, lower than the end of what his projected market range was, but still a pretty sizable deal. Like a ton of safeties signed. The Titans were apparently in on Javon Holland, but the price got too high and they backed out. They were apparently in on Justin Reed. Not sure if that was a cost thing or if he just didn't choose to come play for Tennessee, which you can understand why a player wouldn't do that with the current state of this roster. So the Titans pivot to Xavier Woods. Xavier Woods will be probably the starting strong safety next to Amani Hekker, and a value signing. He was not their first choice, as I talked about. They were in on Javon Holland. They were in on Justin Reed. But he is the kind of player that Mike Borgonzi has talked about, similar to Cody Barton. He's a durable player who's played a lot of snaps. He's a solid, low-cost veteran who's going to come in and fill a role on this roster as they look to draft and develop to really build the foundation of this team. Xavier Woods is exactly that type of player who's going to give you good snaps. He's not a superstar, but he's not going to kill you on the back end. What do we know more about Xavier Woods, Justin?
Well, before I get into that, I want to say something about the safety market in general.
Yeah.
They were in on Javon Holland, as you said. I didn't think Javon Holland got overpaid, and I thought they should have been willing to do that deal. That's a 25-year-old versatile, do-it-all defensive back, still in the prime of his career. Titans could build forward with him. There was an injury last year, so perhaps, that scared them away a little bit. But here's some context. And look, I get offensive tackle, way more premium position, super different situation. But I wanted to offer this as context. The New York Giants signed Javon Holland, 3 years, $45 million. They made him the 8th highest paid safety in the league. He barely cracked the top 10. He's only in the top 10 by a couple 100,000, okay? The Titans made Dan Moore the 9th highest paid tackle in the league, right? I think Javon Holland is a significantly better player at his position than Dan Moore is. Now, again, Dan Moore plays a way more important position of need, a premium position, different circumstance. I get it. But for context, I don't think Holland was overpaid. I think that's sort of a fair, decent value for him. Thought the Titans should have been in on that. Justin Reed got $10 million a year, by the way. I'd rather have given Javon Holland $15 million a year than Justin Reed $10 million a year. That's just a personal opinion. But they pivot to Xavier Woods, as you said. It's 2 years, $10 million. Short-term Band-Aid solution. This is an 8-year pro. I'm not even sure he'll play out the second year of that contract. He will start this year opposite Amani Hekker. Durable, as you said, it's been a theme. Dan Moore over 4,000 snaps at tackle, never hurts. Xavier Woods played the most snaps in the NFL this past season. That's defense or offense. 1,218 snaps. Over the last 7 years, he has played 91% of snaps or more. He's essentially been at 100% 3 years in a row. It's completely unheard of. Now, that was on a really bad Carolina Panthers defense, but I don't think that was necessarily his fault. So that secondary just really didn't have much in it. outside of him and J.C. Horn, and they had no pass rushers either. They're like the worst pass rushing team in the NFL. So made life tough on him. Again, he's going to start opposite Amani Hooker this year. I think he complements the skill set decently. I think this is a guy, 8-year pro. I think he's better playing in the box. He had like 100-some tackles this year, career high, 120. He's better in the box. You let Amani Hooker roam, do what he does best as a ball hawking safety. And they don't need to draft a safety highly, at least this year. I think they can kick the can down the road for a year because they also re-signed Mike Brown, who I think is a fine number 3 type safety. Gave them some good snaps this year's past year's a rotational guy, special teams player. They've got too many holes to draft a safety highly. I don't love the overall state of the position in terms of Mike Brown and Xavier Woods being your 2 and 3, but when you've got the holes that you have at receiver, edge, quarterback, guard, they can't draft a safety this year. They've got to roll forward with the Band-Aid solutions they have.
Yeah, and I think, to your point about overpaying for Dan Moore compared to what they were willing or unwilling to do at safety, look, if they're trying to put themselves in a position to draft best player available throughout the draft, right? And I think, personally, I'm reading everything so far as they are planning to draft Cam Ward at quarterback. I've seen more and more reports about it since our last podcast when I said that, and more insider rumblings that I can't really spill the beans on, but it does feel very much to me like they are going to be targeting Cam Ward with the number 1, but they didn't sign any bridge quarterback, and the quarterbacks left are career backup types. Outside of Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers, Aaron Rodgers, by the time this pod comes out, might be a Pittsburgh Steeler. I would expect Russell Wilson to be the New York Giants plan C, and they go all in on him out of pure desperation. We heard a report that the Titans were in on Russell Wilson, but Paul Kaharski shot that down. So my point is, they didn't go get a bridge veteran quarterback. So all signs are pointing towards they're going to draft Cam Ward. They're not running it back with Will Levis. Maybe they sign a Mac Jones. Maybe they bring back Mason Rudolph. Maybe they get Carson Wentz, as one random Boston media guy said they might be looking at. Like, all those guys are backups to Cam Ward. So my point is, they are setting themselves up to draft best player available, but at the tackle position, like, you couldn't just bring a tackle in and have him start as a rookie. It just isn't good at, like, outside of the first round, outside of the top 10, even the guys picked in the top 10, rookie tackles struggle a lot, and the Titans have been through that too many years in a row to go through it again. With safety, like, you are comfortable with Xavier Woods starting next to Amani Hooker, but if let's say they trade back in the second round, you're sitting there at your second round pick after you trade back, and one of these high quality, like, this is a draft that is pretty stacked with safeties. One of these safeties is on the board that you like, you can take him. And you don't have to rush him in to be a starter. I'm not saying they would do that. Like, they have bigger holes to fill. They have bigger holes to fill, but the whole point is they're not trying to fill holes in the draft. And so we're going to get to this in a bit. But, like, I still think they're going to sign multiple edge rushers. I think they're going to sign another receiver or 2 here. Like, they're going to get this roster to the point where they don't have to reach for a position in the draft. And that's why they signed Dan Moore and overpaid him. They had to get the best tackle on the market because they had to get that position solidified, at least to a point where you feel okay about it. They sign a veteran safety. They sign a veteran linebacker. They sign a veteran receiver in Van Jefferson. Justin, I know you have more points, so we can move on to that in a second. But go ahead, get your rebuttal out, and then we'll move on.
I guess where I disagree with you is I don't think they can do anything at receiver or edge that moves the needle at all. Like, I don't think they can put themselves in a best player available scenario with anything they do at edge or receiver in free agency. Like, they need to draft an edge that needs to play right away. They need to draft a wide receiver that needs to play right away. That's the sad state of this roster, and that's the position they've put themselves in. So I don't think they're in a spot to trade back in the second and draft a safety. Like, they could if there's one that they think is an all-pro player in the second round. You know what I mean? Like,
that's what I guess. That is what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah. I think the edge receiver situation is so bad where there's nothing they can do to this roster to say, we can draft best player available. No, at those 2 spots, they've got to draft players to fill holes and play right away. On Wednesday morning, they signed Van Jefferson to a 1-year contract worth up to $2.5 million. This is after Nick Westbrook-Ikhine signs with the Miami Dolphins the night before, on a 2-year contract worth $6.5 million. I mean, that one kind of blew me away. I thought we had reached the point, certainly in Titans media fan base, where Nick Westbrook-Ikhine was a little overrated. Team high 9 touchdowns last year. It was almost unfathomable that he scored that many touchdowns for the level of player he is on such a bad offense, by the way. Like, he deserves a lot of credit for that. Can't take that away from him. 9 touchdowns. It was astounding.
Kind of fluky, but yes, credit to him. Go ahead.
It's supposed to be a bargaining chip, right? Like some Titans fans were talking 10, 11, 12 million a year. That's where I thought it got out of hand. But I'll be like, I thought it was going to be 5, 6 million a year. Like that's not outrageous. The fact that he got less than 3.5 million a year, I think it's about 3.2, blows me away. I mean, De'Ami Brown, by the way, who we talked about potentially being a decent guy in free agency, got 1 year, 10 million in Jacksonville, up to 12. There's incentives. He's never had a 350-yard season in 4 years. Nick Westbrook-Ikhine had 9 touchdowns. He gets a quarter, essentially, of the money that, like, I couldn't believe that deal. I'll give back to you. I've got more to say, but I'll throw it back.
Well, that's just the market right now for guys who can create explosives in an offense, even if they aren't super productive. That kind of explosive ability. Tutu Atwell, 1 year, 10 million.
Where did that happen? I didn't see that.
The Rams brought back Tutu Atwell, 1 year, 10 million. The Jags getting De'Ami Brown, 1 year, 10 million. Like that's just the rate for that type of receiver this offseason. I don't know why. It just is. And the Titans aren't in on that.
The funny thing is, though, like I get what you're saying. He's not a super explosive guy, but a couple of his touchdowns this year were 30, 40 yarders where he just beat one vertically, right? Like
who? Nick Westbrook?
Yeah.
Like how about the longest touchdown of the 2024 NFL season? 98 yards.
Like that's my point. I couldn't believe that deal. Look, I couldn't believe the Titans weren't willing to do that deal. And if they were, and you say, oh, he wanted to change the scenery, he felt disrespected in Tennessee, he wants to go to Miami, like, so give him $4 million a year. That would have changed his mind. You know what I mean? Like that's an extra $800,000 a year. That would have changed his mind. 100% in my, money talks, right? So I couldn't believe. And then Van Jefferson, like. Talk about a move, I'm sorry, that solves nothing, doesn't move the needle at all. This guy had 800 yards as a sophomore several years ago, was a second-round pick, was looking as a promising wideout, suffered an injury the next year, limited him to 10, 11 games. The Rams just flat out quit on him the following year, midway through, trade him to Atlanta. Atlanta had a need at receiver that year, a big one. He did nothing. He goes to Pittsburgh this past year, who had a big need at receiver opposite George Pickens. He did nothing.
They traded for Mike Williams in the middle of the season because he was doing nothing.
He's going to come to Tennessee, and I'm sorry, he's probably going to do nothing. Like, thank God the offseason's not over. He's wide receiver 2 on the depth chart right now. He is actually a downgrade at wide receiver 4, right? Nick Westbrook's a better player, and he should be like a fringe 3-4 in an NFL offense. Van Jefferson, to me, is a mid-tier 4 masquerading as a 2 right now. They're not going to go into the year with him as a 2. I know, as you were going to say, they've got to do, but they might not draft, and they might find themselves overly reliant on a rookie that's not like the Pittsburgh Steelers last year. They drafted Roman Wilson and were counting on him. Roman Wilson did absolutely nothing, and they trade for Mike Williams. Like the Titans might find themselves in the same situation. So they're really reliant on getting an instant contributor at receiver in the draft, and they better hope it happens.
To be fair, Mike Williams also did nothing. Roman Wilson also did nothing. Van Jefferson also did nothing. Maybe the Pittsburgh Steelers offense, just receivers weren't doing anything.
George Pickens did something, He's
the only one.
Talent will do something.
Pat Freiermuth led their offense in receiving yards. That's the super roasted thing. Arthur Smith's offensive coordinator, he's not throwing to receivers a ton. Anyway, but no, I don't think this is a signing that moves the needle at all, but it's another guy that's like a solid vet who you can count on to be a human body on the field that isn't the worst player in the league. Like, is Van Jefferson getting you excited? No. He is wide receiver 4. I don't care what the depth chart says right now. He's wide receiver 4, and I think this is why they let Nick Westbrook walk. This was their rate. This is the rate they wanted to pay a wide receiver for. $2.5 million a year, not almost $3.5. I get it; it's a small difference, but But this is the way the new regime is going to operate. They have a targeted plan, and they're going to execute that plan. They're not going to deviate to pay Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, who is, like you said, at best a fringe 3-4, more money than he deserves because they are desperate and they need it. Like, no, they're not. That's not what they're going to do. Mike tweeted this, and I think this is a really good. Mike Herndon put this out there. I think it was a really well said. This team isn't trying to tank. They're not trying to lose. They're trying to win games, but they know they're not winning the Super Bowl this year, and they're acting accordingly. So I think that's what this move is. I fully expect that they will sign at least one more receiver, maybe 2. There's still guys out there that would excite me from like just a speed, gadgety standpoint. Rondale Moore comes to mind as a guy who would add a lot of speed to this offense, and Brian Callahan can use him on jet sweeps and stuff and screens. He's not going to go be a great route runner and be a wide receiver 2. they're probably going to have to find wide receiver 2 in the draft. But the second round of the draft has a few pretty exciting receiver options that we'll break down once free agency is over. But if we talk about where the roster stands right now, so some guys that will not be coming back. Julius Chestnut, PK reported this on Tuesday night. Julius Chestnut is not going to get a tender offer, which makes sense because the tender offer would have been $3.2 million. PK said they're trying to work something out for a cheaper deal. If they can't do that, he'll hit the market. Other guys that are probably not coming back, linebacker Chance Campbell not being tendered, TK McClendon, exclusive rights free agent, not being tendered. So they'll be on the market when free agency officially opens here soon.
Jack Gibbons as well.
Jack Gibbons as well.
Was also not tendered. That's the biggest one of that group. Yep. He was also not tendered. And they lost Luke Gifford in free agency. He signed with the 49ers. A lot of change at linebacker. Was a bit of a crowded room, right? Gibbons, Gifford, Campbell. I mean, you've still got Murray and Cody Barton, who you signed. You got Cedric Gray and James Williams and Otis Reese. So they had too many linebackers, had to cut bait with some. Jack Gibbons and NWI going really proves that this is no longer the Mike Vrabel, Rand Carthon kind of holdover team, right? They've let go of a couple of guys that were favorites of the previous regime in NWI and Jack Gibbons. And Brian Callahan, by the way, liked NWI too, so that's a little interesting. Terry McCormick just tweeted, as I've got my phone here, that he was told the Titans had a competitive offer on the table for NWI, and he chose Miami instead. I'm going to stand by my conviction that I think if they made that competitive enough, they sway him, but it is what it is.
Maybe he wanted to go play for Mike McDaniel and Tua Tagovailoa. Who knows? They lost, but they did lose him, and they will have to pivot and find somebody else to play that role. Let's talk about one of the bigger stories that happened on Tuesday. Punter Ryan Stonehouse was not tendered. You spoke to his agent. Tell me what you learned.
Yeah, I was in touch with his agent, John Perla, who I've known since they signed Ryan Stonehouse as a UDFA. And I interviewed Stonehouse when he was a UDFA, did a lot of fun stories on him. I've built a good relationship there. And, John Perla confirmed for me that they've decided not to tender him. I asked about the intimate details of that conversation and was told that the Titans just said they were going in a different direction. It was a short conversation like you would with any free agent you're not bringing back. Hey, best of luck. We've decided to go in a different direction. This did shock me initially. I don't think he's perfect. Certainly, we've talked about the hang time issues, directional punting. Certainly felt like at times he was trying to boot it, out there, a leg punter only. But I think we've also started to kind of overly blame him for how bad special teams was last year. Like Ryan Stonehouse was that in 2022 and 2023. It was the same issues, and they weren't the worst special teams unit in the league like they were in 2024. They had other issues, bigger issues than Ryan Stonehouse.
I agree, but we also always complained until Craig Aukerman got fired. We complained about the special teams, and it got even worse under Colt Anderson last year. I'm not disagreeing with that, but it's not like we were like, oh, wow, the punting is so good, but the coverage is terrible. It was like Mike Vrabel would come to the podium every day and say, we're working with Stoney on getting his directional, on getting the blah, 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 blah. And it's like those issues did exist. And I agree, they weren't the worst special teams unit, but they were a bottom third special teams unit. And that's why every Titans fan was screaming for Craig Aukerman to get fired. So while Absolutely. I agree with you on some point, I also think it was worse than they made it out to be at the time. And then you're making it out to be right now.
I think this came as a shock for a reason, right?
To
us. Like, there's not a position of weakness that we thought they were going to make a change at, right? Like, it caught everyone by surprise. It blindsided us. I'm going to guess, and it's safe to assume that special teams coordinator John Bones Fassel had his thumbprints all over this decision because mere hours later, they signed a veteran punter, Johnny Hekker, who started his career under Bones, right? Was his previous special teams coordinator with the LA Rams. No doubt Bones has his fingerprints, again, all over this decision. For me, I'm skeptical about swapping out a 25-year-old punter for a 35-year-old punter. It's punter. They've got bigger needs, bigger things to be concerned about. But when punter is a need a year or two from now, we might say, oh, maybe they should have kept the 25-year-old punter they had and continued working with him. But I guess we'll just have to trust a great special teams coordinator on this one. Certainly caught me by surprise. Wasn't a move that I was behind.
Yeah, they obviously don't think Stoney's going to get to the point that they want him to be, and then they'll find another punter. This is obviously a Band-Aid. They're going to be a draft and develop team. That includes the undrafted free agent portion of the draft, and maybe they'll find a punter this year that they can groom, or next year that they feel more comfortable with, or they'll always be a 35-year-old punter that gets cut, and they can just go sign that guy every year and just keep it cycling. All right, real quick here, where the roster currently stands, holes that they still have. Obviously, we talked about quarterback. They need a wide receiver 2 and a wide receiver 3. Van Jefferson doesn't change that. Yep. They need a right guard. they need at least 2 edge rushers, probably 2 edge rushers. That's what we're going to be looking for over the next few days here as free agency starts to wind down and shift into waves 2 and 3. They're going to have to sign more wide receivers. And the options out there are not great, but a Keenan Allen, Amari Cooper, Tyler Lockett, somebody who is a veteran that is past their prime and definitely on the washed side of things, is like they're probably going to have to bring one of those guys in just because they can't go into the season with Calvin Ridley, a bunch of rookies, Van Jefferson, and Bryce Oliver. Like, they can't do that. Right guard, I would keep an eye on Kevin Zeitler. PK had him as one of the Titans targets that he got from a source within the team. A lot of PK's targets came to fruition either as Titans were interested in or Titans signed. Some of them didn't. Will Fries was the only other guard on his list there, so I would keep a big eye on Kevin Zeitler today or the rest of this week if it doesn't happen today. And then edge rushers. I mean, Azeez Ojulari is still out there. Any other edge rushers that you are excited about?
Zadarius Smith, Charles Omenihu. They're at least guys that would add better depth than they have now. A bit more of a needle mover than Van Jefferson, but wouldn't totally solve the position either.
Yeah, I agree. It's all Band-Aids, and maybe Michael Williams falls to the second round after he ran a 4.8 at his pro day while we were recording this podcast, and he can be the Titans target at 35. Anyway, so that's where the Titans stand as free agency is set to open officially soon, legal tampering period winding down. We'll be back the next time the Titans make a big move. If they don't make another big move this week, maybe we'll hop back on Friday and do a little mini recap like this again, or if there's nothing really to talk about, maybe we'll hold it till Monday and see if they make some moves over the weekend. But
I have a feeling they'll do something that's worthy of another emergency pod, maybe even today or tomorrow.
Kevin Zeitler, let's do it. All right, so until then, we appreciate everyone for tuning in. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Give this video a thumbs up, like, turn on notifications to get an alert, and drop a comment below. What's your favorite move so far, and what do you think of the Titans roster? Are you one of the fans out there that's screaming, the sky is falling, this team sucks, the GM sucks, everybody sucks? If so, let us know, and maybe we'll talk you off the ledge in the comment section. Thanks to Sinkers Beverages for sponsoring this episode, and until something else happens, y'all stay safe out there, and tighten up.
A Broadway sports media production.